in right. So the journey of Islamic crowdfunding, one of the pioneers of Islamic crowdfunding today is Aethys is considered one of the Islamic pioneers of Islamic crowdfunding. Before I begin, I think I need to clarify one thing. I haven't finished my PhD yet. I'm still a PhD candidate at Aethys, at INSEF, but yeah, hopefully the journey will end very soon, inshallah. So, okay, firstly, the Aethys believes, at Aethys we believe that the crowdfunding is the future of Islamic capital markets. So we have Islamic capital market today. We have equities, we have sukuk, but in the future, we believe that the crowdfunding would take that place because of its inclusiveness, because of its social impact and transparency and a lot of things, and because of its pace and its speed, thanks to the financial technology that we leverage on. And on the other hand, digital Islamic social finance would create sustainable financial inclusion and sustainability. So when we are talking about crowdfunding, it could be for investment, it could be just a social finance in terms of charity. When it comes to Islamic, it could be sadaqah, zakat, and waqf, inshallah. So we will go to those things, inshallah. So for those who the concept is quite new. I hope most of us have heard about crowdfunding in one way or another. But just in a nutshell, crowdfunding is just a way to fund from the crowd, as the word literally says, but using the technology, using the financial technology of fintech. Now, how it works is that, just like I give always an analogy of e-commerce platform. So if we go to an e-commerce platform, let's say Amazon, or maybe in Malaysia, for example, there is Lazada, Shopee, and there are many others in various parts of the world. So we have two groups of users on both ends. So here is the platform, and then we have on one hand the merchants who sell their products, and then on the other hand we have users, or purchasers or buyers who buy the different types of products from the merchants through the platform. So the platform is basically a marketplace of the products, or we can also say it's a matchmaker between the two groups, the merchants and the product buyers, right? So how it works in terms of crowdfunding is basically, crowdfunding is exactly the same concept, but for funds. So on one hand, we have the fund borrowers, or we can call them issuers, or we can also call them campaign owners, project owners. All that means the same thing, that they are going to get the funds. And on the other hand, we have the fund givers, the donors, investors, lenders. All those convey the same meaning, that they are going to give the funds. So the platform here, the platform or the operator here is basically matchmaking between the two groups and flowing the funds from one group to the another, using the technology, using the financial technology. So in the ideal scenario, the flow of funds would be through the platform itself, and the funders would have the entire transparency of where the fund is moving to. And on the other hand, the fund borrower or the recipient of the fund would also provide the transparency and the updates on what is the status of the fund and what's happening with the fund. Now, this concept started with basically in a more lending and charity. We will go through, inshallah, the different types, but just to give a context, in the very beginning, we see some crowd lending concept, or they would call them P2P lending. So P2P is basically peer-to-peer. So instead of going to bank when I need money, I would just go to the platform, ask to the crowd, which consists of people from around the world or from around the different regions of a country, that I need money for this and this purpose. People will come and lend me the money. So this is where it started in the very beginning. This was one concept. And then there was concurrently another concept, which was much similar to charity, that people would want money, same thing, but without returning it back. So maybe someone wants to release his first music album, for example, or maybe he wants to help from some school students or college students to pay the fees and raise the funds online. and they don't want to return it back. So people would give them the funds for social return. I mean, no return in terms of monetary return, but of course a social impact in the return. So this is how it started. But when it went bigger and bigger, and moreover, the lending concept took the prominence, and whenever there is a lending, of course, there is a return, right? So the funders or the lenders would expect a return in exchange of giving the funds to the borrower. So this is where the issue of Sharia compliance comes into the picture. Just like when we had conventional banking, we had interest-based banking. So the bank, what does a bank do? Bank is also the same thing. Bank takes the money from depositors and then lend it to the borrowers, right? The only difference is in crowdfunding, we have entire transparency. The funders would know where the fund is moving to. In case of banks, they don't have that transparency. So that's the only difference. But when it comes to conventional banking, again, what analogy I was trying to give, when it comes to conventional banking, and there is this lending and borrowing relationship, and there is a return in exchange. So we need to check, when it comes to Islamic finance, we need to check if that is Sharia compliant or not. Because if that is not Sharia compliant, then it falls under riba, and the riba is what prohibited in Al-Quran and Sunnah or the Sharia law, and a Muslim is supposed to refrain from it in any circumstance. So just like to avoid riba, we came up with the concept of Islamic banking from banking. We came up with the concept of takaful from insurance. We came up with the concept of sukuk from bonds. Just similar to that, from crowdfunding or conventional crowdfunding, just to differentiate and make it in a Sharia compliant way, we came with the concept of Islamic crowdfunding. Now, there are a few slides. I will just move very quickly. So this is about rise of fintech. Unfortunately, the data wasn't updated after 2018, but it shows the picture that the rise of fintech was quite heavy, and especially last year and until now, due to the COVID, the use of technology in every sector, and of course in financial sector, has gone up quite significantly. Unfortunately, I don't have the data here, but it's quite evident. We can go to any data house and see. And if we look at more specifically in a narrower space about Islamic economy, we see the same trend. Islamic economy is projected to grow even quite higher than current pace. And the number of Muslims are also growing as a group of population and religious group, right? So this all makes the bigger picture that there is a potential for Islamic economy, there is a potential for Muslim-friendly economy or Muslim-friendly financing. But again, the idea of Islamic, whenever we call it Islamic banking, Islamic insurance, Islamic bond, or Islamic crowdfunding, Islamic fintech, it doesn't mean that it is exclusive to Muslims. It is open to Muslims and non-Muslims, everyone. Just like halal food. Halal food can be consumed by everyone. It's not that it's a very exclusive food for a group of people. No, it's for everyone. The essence of Islamic finance, and in fact, the essence of Islam is a blessing for every human being in the world. Not only human being, even for the animals, the whole entire world, the rahmah, the blessing for the entire world. So that's what we try to do in Islamic crowdfunding. Interestingly, at Ethis, we have a number of non-Muslim investors. Why do they come to Ethis? Because of the social impact they see. It's not only for the monetary return or the financial return, but also the social return they can make. They see that they can do with come up with ethical investments through Ethis, so that's why they invest with us. Anyway, let me go to this slide first, and then I will move to the other slides. So these are the very basic types of crowdfunding that exist. Firstly, charitable crowdfunding, which I mentioned that it was one of the first few types when crowdfunding started. And basically the campaigns would be charitable campaigns, and returns would be no worldly return, or in other words, no financial return. Of course, there is a social return if we consider social or non-monetary return as well. And if we want to say, okay, what's the Sharia compliant version of it? Basically, charity by default is Sharia compliant unless the charity is made for something that is Sharia prohibited. For example, a charity is made for a wine factory, for example, na'uzubillah, or a charity is made for a pork factory, for example. That would be Sharia non-compliant. But other than that, by default, charity is Sharia compliant. Of course, there are certain different ways for the charity. There is waqaf, there is zakah. Zakah is an obligatory charity. Sadaqah is a non-obligatory one, and waqaf is a perpetual charity for which the intention is to keep it as long as we can and to reap the benefits in the hereafter, right? Now, few examples of those charity crowdfunding that exist at this. The examples given here are basically all Islamic crowdfunding. And the first one you see Global Sadaqah, and this is operated by Ethis. So we have partnerships with different charities on the other hand, different NGOs, credible NGOs, and then on the other hand, there are funders or donors who wants to donate or who wants to give funds based on charity. Either on the basis of sadaqah or it's a zakah or it's a waqf. So this is very clear cut. We don't have any significant Sharia compliance issue, right? The next one is reward based crowdfunding. So it's similar to charity based crowdfunding in the sense that the funder would not expect any monetary return or financial return from the funding. However, there is some sort of reward. For example, maybe the funder is providing funds for manufacturing something, and the manufacturer is giving 1 or 2 samples as a gift, as a reward to the funder. It is not in line with the financial return that usually is expected by a investment. So that's why this is called reward-based crowdfunding. And if we look from Sharia point of view, by default it is fine. It can be a charity and hiba, or in some cases, for example, the examples of Kickstarter.com. So Kickstarter in Kickstarter, we will see a lot of innovative ideas people come up with. They provide the concept, the MVP, and all those things, and people would be interested to advance, buy something. So reward-based crowdfunding has been modified a bit. So initially it was like people would give as a charity and they get in return some 1 or 2 samples. But Kickstarter, in most cases, has come up with a more innovative example structure, in the sense that instead of getting that as a reward, getting that as a right. For example, I'm funding a factory or a project whereby the manufacturer would be manufacturing, or not manufacturing, basically coming up with bags, for example, innovative bags where I can put my laptop, this and that. And I would have an option to pre-buy instead of waiting until the production is done. So I can pre-order and get it at a huge discount. So that from Sharia compliant Sharia point of view is just a sale contract. It's just a pre-order. I'm purchasing in advance, paying the money in advance, and getting the product at some point of time. And this is Sharia compliant, and Sharia has a way basically to do it, which is called a salam contract, which is a forward purchase. Now this is another model. Then the most prominent 2 types when it comes to getting anything in return is basically P2P crowdfunding and equity crowdfunding. So I will start with P2P crowdfunding. P2P is, again, as I mentioned, peer-to-peer. Basically, it started with a lender and borrower relationship. So a lender would lend his money for a certain project in exchange of some return, some financial return. Let's say there is a 3% return, there is a 4% ROI. And that ROI or interest is a Sharia issue, basically. Because in Sharia, I cannot just lend money and get an additional return in exchange, because that's money for money without assuming any underlying risk. And that's what riba is. That's what Sharia prohibits. So this is where we have to be innovative. We have to come up with different structures that would meet the objective, and at the same time, it would make the funder assume the underlying risk and gain the profits. So this is where we come up with the Islamic version of it. So in Ethis, we have Ethis.co, which is for Indonesia. So for Indonesia, we have, I will have the slides later on, inshallah, but just an overall picture. So in Indonesia, we have started with basically some real estate P2P crowdfunding, and now we are doing different types of working order financing through P2P crowdfunding. So what happens is that, for example, a borrower or an issuer or a developer would come to us and he needs money. So we would assess why he needs money for. So if it's a money for construction of houses, then we would go for a istisna contract, for example, which is a construction contract or manufacturing contract. If he needs some money, for example, for working order financing, then maybe we will just go to a musharaka financing. Musharaka is a partnership contract where the profits will be shared based on a pre-agreed ratio. So what I'm trying to say is that since we cannot just lend and gain an interest, and as it is prohibited, so we have to be innovative and come up with different structures which are suitable. Same thing as we do in case of Islamic banking as well, Islamic insurance as well. So this is how we do Islamic crowdfunding for the P2P. Now, when it comes to equity crowdfunding is very straightforward. You issue equity in return of the fund. So it's just like an IPO where the company would give equity or stock in exchange of the fund that it requires to raise. So similarly, equity crowdfunding, let's say I need $500,000. I would issue an equity of maybe 10%, 20%, whatever, based on the valuation that I have for the company that I want to raise money for. And that $500,000, when I get it, I will issue equity in exchange. So in general, Sharia has no issue, right? Because it's straightforward and ordinary shares or shares in the company. However, there are different types of Sharia compliance requirements. For example, I have to see what exactly the fundraising is done for. Is it the company in a halal business sector or a haram business sector? Is it a wine factory, for example? Is it a pork factory, for example? Or is it a casino, for example? I have to see firstly the sector, what sector the business is for. And then there are some financial ratios as well. I have to see if it's a halal business, but it also has some non-halal investments or income coming in. Then there are some certain ratios developed by IOFI, developed by different international indexes, for example, S&P and others. So this sector and business screening and financial screening comes into the picture when it comes to equity crowdfunding. One more thing that comes into the picture is basically the type of shares. Is it an ordinary share or is it a preference share? Because whenever it's a preference share, it has the characteristics almost like a fixed interest or fixed return, and also a preferential treatment when it comes to liquidity. However, those two things are prohibited in Sharia, and this is why IOFI straightforwardly says that preference share is not halal, right? So we have to see those things when it comes to equity crowdfunding, but in general, shares are Sharia compliant because it's just a partnership, right? So if you look at in the list, this is an outdated list, by the way. I mean, we have more equity crowdfunders at this moment, and one of the equity crowdfunding we have is basically our own at Ethys. We are a licensed platform in Malaysia from Securities and Exchange Commission of Malaysia. So we have 3 platforms. We have one charity platform, which I mentioned, Global Sadaqah. It is a crowdfunding for charity. We have one P2P crowdfunding, which is Ethys Indonesia, licensed by OJK, the Monetary Authority of Indonesia. And then we have another one, which is equity crowdfunding, licensed by Securities and Exchange Commission of Malaysia. So these are in general the types of crowdfunding. I hope by now we have understood the underlying logic why we need an Islamic crowdfunding and how basically it is different. In terms of technology, it's neutral. Technology is neutral. It doesn't have in general, it doesn't have a halal and haram issue. Like a lot of people ask this question, is blockchain halal? Blockchain is just a technology. It doesn't have anything, either it's a halal or haram. It is the use, how we use it, right? So when it comes to crowdfunding, when it comes to underlying technology or the fintech that we are using, it is neutral. It is halal if we are using it for a halal purpose in a halal way. It is haram if we are using for a haram purpose in a haram way. Very straightforward. So the technology is same for both conventional and Islamic. However, the logic, how we apply it, the contracts that we use it, the projects that we fund for is different. I hope by now it's clear. Now, what I will do is next few slides, I will quite quickly skim through a few of the things that we do at Ethys. So this is about P2P crowdfunding and equity crowdfunding. I think in general, you get the idea what I have just mentioned. P2P comes for basically project financing or financing where we don't require the funds to issue equity in the company itself. Rather, maybe it's a time-bound financing. Maybe it's a short-term financing, right? So this is where P2P comes in. However, equity crowdfunding would come where we want to sell the stock. It's a long-term financing kind of, where the exit would be when the shares would be sold or in the next fundraising round, just like an IPO, right? And these are the different things that we are trying to do. It's a digital platform that we have. We link funders globally to projects by providing transparency and reporting. This is a very key feature of any crowdfunding platform. Like a question would come in: why crowdfunding? Why we want to go through crowdfunding? Why not banks, for example? The main difference is the transparency and the reporting. So in a crowdfunding platform, the moment funder enters into the crowdfunding, he will receive an update that his funds is being moved, then the project is at this stage and this stage, and that's what significantly differs from traditional banking funding. And then this is about our focus. We have specific project types, countries, and sectors, by the way. And we want to implement true Islamic finance models based on universal ethical principles and a focus on social impact. So this social impact is a keyword that we always try to address. It's not only Islamic finance we are trying to do. We are also trying to make our decisions or investment choices into ethical and impactful campaigns and projects and companies. Right, I will skip this one. This is just about a few advantages of real estate crowdfunding. If the developer is a real estate company, why would he consider coming to a crowdfunding company? So it's more like from investors and also issuers perspective. So in general, the investors have the transparency, number one. There is a bit inclusiveness, so they can come up with small amounts of funds they want to invest in. And transparency also mentions, and updates. So they get frequent updates from the issuer or the platform where the fund is currently now. And from the issuer's perspective, it's a huge marketing for him. It's a huge promotion for his project. It's a test how people perceive his project or his campaign, for example. So if he's starting a new business, it's a test of demand. It's like a market test, for example. So he can see how people are reacting to the fundraising campaign. So that kind of signifies how he needs to change his strategy and what would be the next action for him. Okay, so this is about our Ethis Indonesian platform, and here initially we had funded for real estate projects, especially social impact housing projects. And now, so since COVID started, we are more focusing on working financing, work order financing. So short-term projects, there is a work order, and the work order is secured. So this is where the funders would come in together with the campaign owner or the issuer. They complete the project, and then an invoice is issued, and they get paid, and the return is shared based on the pre-agreed profit sharing ratio. So this is the POC or proof of concept we had in Indonesia. Basically, in 2020 we got the license, from OJK, but until 2020 we had completed different projects and to see how it works and what are the issues that could be identified and all those things until we got the license, alhamdulillah, last year. Right, and this is an interesting stats from our Indonesian campaigns, but this is a bit outdated. I think the data would be quite more at this moment, but this gives a general idea that we see that a lot of interest we see in the crowdfunding arena, and especially from the millennials, the young professionals who want to do things on their fingertips, right? So this signifies that. And one thing is, if you look at this diversity of the people of the funders from around the globe, and when we ask our investors why would you like to invest through Ethis, so the first thing they want from us is basically halal or Sharia compliant. We know that in many countries they don't have any halal alternative of halal avenue to invest in. So this is why they would look for such operators or such platforms where they can channel their funds through halal investment opportunities. This is one sample structure that we have where we would invest, or people would invest through us for social impact housing projects. And we have two different sets involved, two different phases involved. One is Istisna. As I mentioned, Istisna is basically a construction contract or a manufacturing contract. In the first phase,
The funders are basically through Ethis, through appointing Ethis, asking the issuer or the developer to build the house and sell to the investors. And in the second phase, which is Murabaha, basically the developer on behalf of Ethis is selling the houses to a third party and getting the return back and disbursing to the investors. I will not go through detail of this model, but if there is any question, someone wants further clarification, inshallah, I will clarify later on. These are the current platforms. I already mentioned that these are the current platforms that we have. And finally, yeah, we believe that crowdfunding is the future of Islamic finance and the emerging world. And why we believe that? Because when we started Islamic banking in 1960s and 70s, if we look at Meet Gamar, for example, or early Islamic banks, for example, we were actually trying to replace or come up with an alternative to what has been there for centuries, right? It has been a conventional banking and we wanted to change that. And there has been a lot of difficulties. Why? Because there has been a set of framework. A lot of things are connected, interconnected, the taxation, these and that. And to change the entire framework is quite difficult. Still now in many countries, we don't have the laws for Islamic legal framework. We don't have this and that. And because of that, to implement true Islamic finance is quite a challenge. Now, with the emergence of Islamic fintech or financial technologies, we see a huge room of innovation can take place there. The legal frameworks can be formulated from scratch, and that's where the true value of Islamic finance can be reinvented. That's what we believe. So, for example, when we started crowdfunding, it hasn't been the case that we had so many frameworks all around the world, but at this moment, we have many countries who have issued crowdfunding licenses, who have issued crowdfunding guidelines. For example, Malaysia, Indonesia, then we have UK. There are many other countries, for example. IOFI, for example, is also developing a crowdfunding governance standard. Today, after this, inshallah, we have a working committee meeting for IOFI, and I will be there as well, inshallah. So a lot of things happening now with crowdfunding, because it's a new thing. People are still in the development phase, and we can be very, very innovative. We can go through the true essence of Islamic finance. We don't need to just emulate and just copy paste whatever conventional things we're doing. So this is what makes us believe that the future of Islamic finance is crowdfunding and other Islamic fintech sectors. Right. So last few slides are basically, this is a slide. This is a screenshot of how our platform works. In general, any crowdfunding campaign would have how much we need to raise. Right. This is the goal. How much has been raised so far? How much is the time period? What is the duration? And what is the projected return? This for P2P. But when it comes to equity, there would not be projected return unless it's a preference share. And as I mentioned, preference share has today issues. So usually it would be what the campaign is about, what are the exit point and all those things when it comes to equity crowdfunding. But for P2P, there will be a returns and projected returns in place. This is some campaigns from Global Sadaqah, which I mentioned. It facilitates zakat, sadaqah, and waqf type of charities. But the distinguishing factor here is basically not that anyone can go to Global Sadaqah and open an account and raise funds. No. Only fundraisers or borrowers here, not borrowers, the charity fundraisers or fund recipients are here, credible registered NGOs. So we have NGOs from Malaysia, we have NGOs from other countries as well, but they have to be registered partners. So that brings a level of trust. So basically the end recipient, verification of the end recipient is done by the NGO itself, and the platform operator, Global Sadaqah, ensures that the NGOs are credible and they are not scam and they are not fraud. Why we do that? We do that so that we minimize the risk of channeling the charity elsewhere and the lack of trust that we have in many charity platforms and organizations throughout the globe. And that's it. That's what crowdfunding does, and that's what we do at Ethis. I think I wanted to be very, very brief in my presentation, but I hope that it's well understood, the basic concepts. If there is any specific questions, inshallah, we can definitely go through and further discuss. Thank you so much. Jazakumullah khairan.
Okay, now, so we are open for Q&A. If anybody has any questions, kindly post it in the chat so that we can ask them directly. Okay, so the first question. What is the ideal profit sharing ratio between investor and real estate developer in Musharaka contract?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Ajmal. A very good question. Basically, there is nothing called ideal profit sharing ratio when it comes to Musharaka contract, and in fact in Mudaraba contract as well. So in a partnership, the difference in profit sharing ratio could be determined based on many different aspects. Maybe the developer is quite credible. Maybe he has a lot of experience, a lot of past histories and all those things. Maybe he would deserve a higher profit sharing ratio. No issue. The only thing we need to consider here is that the sleeping partner in crowdfunding, for example, the funders are basically sleeping partner because they don't contribute in the management or the work of the partnership itself. So a sleeping partner cannot get a profit sharing ratio higher than his capital contribution ratio. Let me repeat, a sleeping partner cannot get profit sharing ratio higher than his capital contribution ratio. So let's say it's a $500,000 venture or musharaka, and then the sleeping partner has contributed 250,000, which is 50% of the profit sharing ratio. Sorry, capital. Now, if we want to give him 51% of the profit, we cannot, because he deserves 50% of the profit because of his 50% capital. The additional 1%, there is no counter value for that, counter exchange for that. However, if it is a working partner, or in your case, the developer can get until 99%, for example, because we will say that he contributed 50% and he deserved 50% profit sharing ratio because of that. And the rest 49% is because of his work contribution. No issue. Only thing we need to remember is that the profit sharing ratio should not have any such element because of which one party could have completely deprived of the profit. So if we are saying, for example, the first $5,000 profit will go to this partner, and after that it will be disbursed or distributed, it's not right. It's Sharia non-compliant, because maybe the profit is only 5,000, maybe the profit is below 5,000. In both cases, one party is completely deprived of the profit. So if we have that basic principle in mind and the basic condition that I just mentioned, the capital ratio of the sleeping partner, etc., then the profit sharing ratio can go anywhere. There is no such thing that ideal profit sharing ratio would be this and that. Thank you so much.
So the next question is, what is the breakup of Ethis portfolio between equity and P2P volume facilitated?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rashid. So equity crowdfunding and P2P crowdfunding basically are two different platforms in two different countries, licensed by two different regulators. So it's not that we get the fund and we break up into two different portfolio. It's not like that. Rather, the investors choose to invest in the particular projects themselves. So I think there is no straightforward answer by me. The equity crowdfunding has recently just started. I think we just completed one full campaign, meaning that one fundraising, and the second one is currently running. And there are a few more campaigns would come very soon, inshallah. You can browse through ethis.co/my for the Malaysian equity crowdfunding platform. The rest all has been through the P2P crowdfunding so far, because that's what existed for almost 4 or 5 years now. I hope that answers your question. Thank you so much.
Okay, so the next one is, we don't have Islamic banks in India. So what should be our alternative?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think wherever we have these regulatory bottlenecks and licensing issues for banks, I think we can start with such fintech platforms. For example, this crowdfunding. Why is it that? Because in our experience, we found in many countries, the country doesn't have any regulation as of yet for crowdfunding. So basically, whenever someone wants to start with something like crowdfunding, they would just be considered as a technology company. So just like any other technology company can register to a joint stock company, they can start with like that as well. So it's easy to start. However, whenever regulations are coming in, that initial company or the first mover or the pioneer would also have a stake in shaping the regulation in that country. This is what we saw in the case of Indonesia, in the case of Malaysia, and also a few other countries. So that gives an additional advantage as well. When the fintech regulations are being formed, and we are the pioneer, then we can also influence and participate in the regulation. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is that for countries where we don't have traditional financial institutions, fintech is definitely a blessing to start with, and it should be quite easier in relation to traditional financial institutions. However, country to country differs. I don't have full overview of India at this moment in front of me, but in general, it should be quite easier than other financial institutions. Hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Okay. So the next one is, can Indian citizens invest in equity crowdfunding of Ethis? I think so. That's what you meant.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I think, yeah. So in general, any citizen can invest with equity crowdfunding. So equity crowdfunding, there are many. I was mentioning about the Ethis equity crowdfunding that we have in Malaysia. We can have global investors as well. In fact, we have many Indian citizens as well investing with us. However, I mean, you may have to check your local regulations, how to transfer the funds and all those things. Maybe there are restrictions, or maybe there are ways to do that in a legally compliant manner. But in general, yes, we accept investments from different citizens. Yeah, thank you.
So the next one is how Ethis is leveraging IoT in its model of crowdfunding.
Yeah, thank you for this question. Basically, we since we don't operate into the projects directly, it's basically we are the operator of the platform itself. So we play mostly with data. We play mostly with the underlying financial technology and the different components of it, and we are trying to continually enhance it. However, the issuers that we work with, I can maybe mention about one recent issuer, which is in the agriculture sector. And basically, as I know, they're planning to use IoT in agriculture, right, in the harvesting and fertilization and all those things. But in general, as a platform, we don't use IoT so far. Thank you for your question.
So the next one is, please elaborate more on preferential shares, as we were told that we can go for this and for Sharia compliant.
Yeah, thank you for this question. So basically, when it comes to preference shares, so preference would be given in various terms. So in some cases, I mean, what we mean in general, basically by preference shares is a preferential treatment in terms of dividend, in terms of when it comes to liquidation. So those preferential treatments in terms of dividend or profit, which basically comes with, for example, a fixed amount of return. So if it's a fixed amount of, I'm giving a general understanding because there are different types of structures basically. So if it's a fixed amount given, let's say 7% or 5% or something like that, then it's a straightforward riba. It has no differentiation from a loan and interest, even though we are calling it a preference shares. If it is not like that, rather it says, okay, the party would be given preferential treatment in terms of profit, so that they are getting the profit at first, and until certain point, once they receive their portion, then the next ordinary shares people would be getting their profit. So this is also problematic, as I just mentioned, that in a profit sharing mechanism, we cannot have any such clause which has the potential to eliminate the other party from the profit completely in any circumstance. So if we are preferring giving a preferential treatment to one group, then there is a potential that the other group would be completely deprived of. So this is why IOFI says it is not Sharia compliant at all. And one more preferential treatment basically is given in terms of liquidation. So in a musharaka or a partnership contract, when it comes to liquidation, everyone deserves the amount based on its capital contribution ratio. After the liquidation event happens, after the loans, etc., are settled or any other liabilities are settled, then whoever is the owner, everyone will get equally based on their capital contribution ratio. So if someone has invested 20%, he would have 20% of the remainders of the company. But in a preference shares, they are given preferential treatment first so that they can recover their capital first, then comes the second group. So this is also against the Sharia ruling. So all those financial preferential treatment are non-compliant, and this is why IOFI directly says it's not compliant. However, there are preferential treatment in terms of voting rights, in terms of some other considerations, controls, etc., which are in general fine as long as it doesn't imply any financial issue. Now, there are certain difference of opinions. For example, in Malaysia, according to Securities and Exchange Commission's Sharia Advisory Council, we can see some preference shares they have allowed, and based on certain principles. But according to IOFI, it's a straightforward thing. So we have to be, I mean, when we are structuring preference shares, we have to take into consideration that will it be, who would be the audience, who would be the ultimate beneficiary? Is it a locality? Then we can follow a local Sharia standard. If it's an international one, then it's best to, safer to use IOFI as the basis. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, how much does the crowdfunding platform get in return? What is the ratio of the deal done on the platform?
Okay, this is a good question. So in other words, how does a crowdfunding platform earn? So in Islamic crowdfunding, a crowdfunding platform basically acts as a wakil or as an agent on one hand of the investor if the fund is going through the platform. For example, in case of P2P. In case of equity crowdfunding, it doesn't need to go through the platform, meaning that the investor are directly sending the money to a trustee account, and then from the trustee account, it directly goes to the developer's account. In a P2P, it still goes to trustee account. However, maybe there are certain things for which we need the operator as an agent. So whenever there is an agency agreement, agency will come with a fee. It may come up with without a fee as well, but usually it will come up with a fee. On other hand, the operator acts as an agent of the issuer as well. Not agent, as a service provider to the issuer, because the operator is basically crafting his campaign contents, etc., so that it can be presented on the platform. It's just like the relationship between a merchant and an e-commerce platform in case of e-commerce. So a merchant has to pay a certain amount of fees or certain percentage of the sold price as a fee to the platform e-commerce platform owner. So in crowdfunding is the same case. The issuer would have to pay. Maybe in some cases it's completely variable, meaning that they would only have to pay a percentage. Let's say maybe 5%, 6%, or 4%, 3%. It may be different for different platforms. Or in some cases, there could be a fixed amount as well to bear the minimum expenses that the platform operator would incur. So both models exist. Either it's a fixed fee, or it's a variable fee, or it's a combination of both. Hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next one is, can an Indian NGO apply for funding from global charity?
Yeah, thank you so much from its Global Sadaka, the platform that we are talking about. So basically, an Indian or any other NGO, if it is credible means that it has been registered or maybe by the Society Act or NGO Act, whatever act this is there, and it has been doing campaigns, charity campaigns, meaning that it has the documentations and licenses, etc. Then definitely, from anywhere in the world, it can apply through Global Sadaka for specific campaigns to fundraise, inshallah. Thank you.
So the next one is, do you have any Islamic index fund for investing? Like in share market, there is index fund and one can invest. Example, top 500 companies of the world.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Junaid, for the question. So basically, this is the difference. There is a difference between crowdfunding and such index funds or mutual funds. So in index fund, you would invest, and then you have your portfolio can be diversified to an index or matched with an index. However, in a crowdfunding, a funder is basically directly investing to a specific campaign. So they are not giving us funds so that we invest on behalf of them. Rather, they are investing directly to the campaign, to the project. So a platform operator is just a matchmaker between the two different groups. Every decision is directly made by the investor. Hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you. The next one is whether Islamic finance governs all the aspects of modern financial system, and if it governs, how it could be applicable, for example, India, where policymakers are not in favor.
Okay, I think I would need further clarification what you meant by it governs all the aspects of modern financial system. Is it like maybe, doctor, you can clarify if you
Hamza, can you please send this question again?
Yeah, that would be better.
Okay. Yeah. So the next one is, what is Bayul Ina? Why it is not allowed in most of Islamic banking?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ashraf. It's a good question. Basically, Bayul Ina is translated as buyback. So what buyback is basically I'm selling you a good, let's say at $100, and telling you that you sell me back at $110. So why would someone do that? It's a question, right? Why would someone do that? That he would sell his property or any asset at $100 and purchase it back at $110. This is because he needs $100 and he doesn't have $100 in his hand. He's asking someone to give him $100 as a loan, and the person is saying, sorry, I cannot give you because I cannot make money out of it. So he's saying, okay, then in that case, I have something, I have a product, please buy my product at $100 and sell it to me at $110, meaning that I owe you $110 in exchange of $100 that you give me. So why Sharia doesn't allow it? Because whenever we are structuring a buyback, a simultaneous sale of on top of the first sale, and it's just with an additional price, so it amounts to entire same thing that we are prohibited about, which is riba, which is interest. So even though it looks like a sale contract, but it is termed as a fixed sale, which is not a genuine sale. So in Sharia, whenever there is a contract, we have to ensure that the genuinity of the contract or the essence of the contract is maintained. It's just not a contract on paper. The exact things or underlying issues and concerns of a contract should have been addressed. So this is why, since it doesn't happen in a Bayul Ina, it is prohibited according to majority Sharia scholars. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the next one is there any platform for halal EPF for small companies in India?
Okay, I think maybe you are referring to halal ECF or halal equity crowdfunding, because EPF would mean something else, maybe employee provident funding. So equity crowdfunding, I'm sorry, I'm not sure about if there is any in India. If Dr. Ariba, you are aware about, you can answer. I'm sure. Sorry, I'm not aware about that.
Okay, thank you so much. I will answer to the question. Yeah.
I will add one thing. Sorry, doctor. Maybe I will add one thing.
Yeah.
Recently, ETHIS has started a campaign which is called the Pitch 2, which is for basically tech companies or small enterprises, which are small or medium enterprises, basically which are doing something on tech to raise funds. So you may have an interest looking into it, inshallah. Thank you.
Inshallah. Yeah. Thank you. So the next question is, do you know any resident of Germany who can legally invest in crowdfunding? I think so he meant that can a citizen of Germany invest in crowdfunding?
What I know is we have investors from Germany. However, the legal issues, I'm sorry, I have to confirm with my colleagues. But I know that people from Germany have invested with us. That I know for sure. So maybe what I would ask you is that you can drop us an email at support@ethis.co, or maybe you can connect us with a live chat So our team would inshallah get back to you after checking on this issue, inshallah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. The next one is, what do you think about charity crowdfunding in Turkey?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, I would of course think positive. Not only in Turkey, in anywhere in the world, if the regulation permits so, even if the regulation doesn't permit, meaning that there is no regulation as of yet, still since it's a fintech or financial technology, I think it can be easily started with. But one thing we have to be concerned about is that whenever there is charity, a higher level of governance should be there so that the funds are not misused and the level of trust is maintained. This is very crucial. So maybe a trust account or escrow account can be there in case the funds are not directly sent to the charity partners. But if funds are directly sent to the charity partners or the recipients of the funds, then it's quite clean and it can be easily done, I hope, in many countries, inshallah, and even in Turkey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next one is, issuer has to pay the service charge to the platform. Does the investor has to bear any service charge or administration charge?
That's a good question. Thank you, Haris. So basically, the platforms usually try to absorb the administrative cost from the issuer, not the investor itself. But there could be different models. Maybe some model would also require investor to put some money as a administrative fee. But in our case, we try to absorb the cost from the issuer because ultimate beneficiary is the issuer, basically. Thank you.
Thank you. So Mr. Hamza has sent his question again. The question is, by modern financial system, I mean whether the concepts in Islamic financial system like Musharka, Mudarba, etc. covers all the aspects of modern financial system of banking and investment. For example, I have read one book of Taqi Usmani Sahib of Islamic finance.
Yeah, I think I understand. Your previous question was whether Islamic finance governs all aspects of modern financial system, and if it governs, how it could be applicable for example, India, where policymakers are not in favor. Okay, I think two are different issues. One is, if I understand correctly, that does Islamic finance covers all the aspects of conventional finance in respect that it can replace or bring alternative to every aspect of financial system. I would say in most cases, yes. In some cases, not. Not because Islamic finance doesn't have an alternative, but because there shouldn't be any alternative for that. For example, there couldn't be halal wine, for example. There cannot be halal pork, for example. Of course, there is a halal meat, there is halal juice, but cannot be halal alcohol, halal wine. I know there are some countries they also have halal wine, but it's highly debated issue. So there are certain such things. For example, futures contract. For example, short selling. Today we see the discussion of short selling. There are few such things which there is no alternative for in Sharia. But other than that, almost every functions could be met, or every objective can be met in a Sharia compliant manner. Now, why India or any other country, maybe not to be specific to any country, there are many other countries also may have similar issues. That's a different thing. That depends on a lot of different variables. Maybe I am not the right person to answer about that. I hope you get that answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So the last question is, how do we answer time value of money in Islamic finance?
Yeah, good question, Muhammad Shamsher. So in Islamic finance, time doesn't have a separate value. Time could be an attribute in a contract to raise the price from one to another. However, just time itself cannot have a value. Let me give an example. So when we call it time value of money, usually people would give the example of interest. For example, I give loan to someone to be payable in 6 months, let's say $1,000. And if he is paying or defaulting and taking one more month, then he has to add 5%, 10% or whatever. So this 5% or 10% that is adding up to the total, the only component here is time. So we are giving a value to time. It doesn't have any other reason to increase the value. Only reason is time. So this is what prohibited, and from Sharia point of view, non-compliant. However, if I sell something, so there is, I'm trying to sell something in a spot price, and then is in a deferred price, or maybe a price to be paid upon at a future date. So in the spot, I give a discount, maybe $100. But if the price is to be paid in 6 months, so time here works as an attribute of the price. So price could have many variables and attributes. For example, because the product is made in Germany, because the product is this and that quality, because the RAM is this and that, because the motherboard is this and that model, because the time to be paid is 6 months, 10 months, the price is this. So that time value of money, which is considered as an attribute of price of a product, is fine from Sharia point of view, from Islamic financial point of view. But the time value of money that comes to the picture in exchange of a loan contract, in exchange of a debt or payable, this is where we consider Sharia is considering it as an interest, as a riba, and it is prohibited. A Muslim cannot engage with it. Hopefully, in brief, that answers your question, but maybe I would also invite you to read a paper published by ISRA. ISRA has International Sharia Research Academy in Malaysia. They have a lot of research papers. One of the research papers is on time value of money. It's quite comprehensive. You can get it from ifikir.isra.my, and I think it would be quite beneficial, inshallah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And if you have any other questions, kindly post it on the comment section, or you can follow us on our social media handles and ask the questions. We will send the questions to the concerned person. So before we wind up this talk and before the second speaker comes in, I want to give all of you an overview of what Taqwa Invest is. So Taqwa Invest is an Islamic robo-advisory, which is based in UAE. We initiated with a team of 6, and alhamdulillah, we have been growing. Taqwa Invest's aim is to make investments into halal-based products simple, secure, and sustainable. We strongly believe in complying with Sharia rules and laws. Taqwa Invest will also be the cheapest robo-advisory available for the users. We will inshallah be launching our application for the users by the end of this year. It is although a challenge for us to make it available for our users globally, but inshallah we will try to strive and to get this application available to most of you. Our mission is very simple. It is to make halal investment simple, secure, and sustainable. I will give you some glimpses of our application. So yeah, here you go.